You're listening to the Hire Calling Podcast. I'm Pete Newsome, and this is your source for all things hiring, staffing, and recruiting. Really excited to have a special guest on today, Brian Jameson from Echo Gravity. Brian, how are you today?
Oh, doing great, Pete. Really appreciate you having me on here, and just excited to share whatever insights I can.
Wonderful. Well, let's talk a little bit about Echo Gravity before we get into some deeper stuff. You're co-founder, partner of Echo Gravity. Tell us a little bit about the mission you guys are on.
Yeah, so full transparency. So I used to be, and I think I've shared this with you aside. I was actually recruited by my business partner to work in staffing back in 2004. Worked in staffing for a few years. Then I moved on to selling marketing services for a few years. I love sales, love marketing, but love marketing so much. I was like, all right, well, what's my transition into getting into a marketing role? And so I actually went back and did the MBA route. And so wanted to just kind of get that, I guess, under my belt to see if that could kind of catapult me into a marketing role within a company. To be honest, when I went back to school, I was like, all right, I'll probably work for like a bigger company and get into some type of marketing leadership program and that sort of thing. But as it would have it, it was in around 2008, 2009, which we all know what happened around those times. So the job prospects were not plentiful. And actually reconnected with my business partner at the time, Kevin O'Brien. And he was working for a software company at the time as their chief operating officer, and they needed marketing help. So I basically interned with them and started to get into marketing. And found this book called Inbound Marketing. It was written by the guys at HubSpot. And that was around the time they started their software company. And most people know HubSpot. And, kind of now at the time, they were all about, marketing automation and content generation, how you can push stuff out there and drive basically traffic back to your website and create leads and that sort of thing. They've turned since, into more of a full-blown kind of CRM solution and some other things, but just went all in on that, and I just thought it was like the greatest thing. And so we started implementing those same tactics at this software company, creating a lot of content, getting on social media, which was kind of in the nascent stages, with Facebook, LinkedIn, and some of the other ones, and just started pushing that stuff out there, doing different types of campaigns, and just saw really cool results from a lead gen perspective, all B2B type stuff. And, after a couple of years, I mean, again, the economy was not great around that time in 2011. So after school, I went and worked full time for them. Around 2011, 2012, the economy wasn't great. And my business, my then boss and current business partner were like, there might be a good opportunity to bring marketing to the staffing space, which we also know really well. And we, kind of shared the same philosophy that it's marketing within staffing at the time. And, I would still argue to this day is a bit underserved and underinvested in. So that's what spawned Echo Gravity. We kind of went out in 2011, just he and I, and said, hey, we'll kind of go out there and be this like outsourced marketing duo. And at the time we were writing blog posts, we were writing social media, posting stuff, running, it's kind of soup to nuts, just he and I doing it. And slowly it grew, and you start to gain some traction. And then we added some much more capable team members that were actually writers and more savvy on social media. And that's really what started our journey with Echo Gravity. And since then, we've grown, organically over that time, and currently are 15, 16 people, and service probably 95% of our client base is in the staffing recruiting space.
I love your story. You were getting started about the same time I was starting Four Corner Resources, and as you know, I didn't do any marketing for 13 years. And if I had a dollar for every time I've kicked myself for not having a different perspective and approach back then, but I didn't know what I didn't know. Like you, I was a salesperson. Marketing meant nothing to me back then. And I think about it so often and say, what a massive missed opportunity, right? So, what do you think
Yeah.
it is with the staffing industry? I think about this a lot. I'm sure you've put even more thought into it. Why do you think the staffing industry has not embraced the digital world like so many other industries have?
Yeah, I think it's I mean, my personal opinion, I think it's a combination of just that sales mindset, and that producer mindset. It's, kind of the old school mentality, which I think a lot of firms, back in the day would promote, which is, hey, you got to smile and dial, you got to hit your numbers, you got to, go on so many meetings and, take so many people out to lunch. And, that's the way you're going to get requirements. And that's the way you're going to, build relationships. And I still think that's true. I mean, you still need to build relationships and absolutely, there needs to be a sales and producer recruiting presence out there to foster those relationships. But I think that's part of it. It's like, this mentality that I can kind of go out there and do it. And I think that, has kind of been delivered from, leadership over, kind of the old school mentality is, kind of get out there, build your relationships and go do it where, so they've underinvested in marketing, or they've looked at marketing as, hey, create a brochure or, have something to leave on someone's desk or leave behind in a folder. And I think we both agree like those things are kind of dated and, in this digital world that we live in, and just being a little bit behind the curve and being able to push out stuff over digital formats and having people be able to find you and learn about your business and learn about issues that you're solving that may be topical and, in a less salesy type of way. Instead of just smiling and dialing, it's fostering a relationship over time, talking about topics that, might be pain points or things that you're just posing the questions out there, posing the topics and having an opinion, having, thought leadership position and an idea on it, and letting prospects and people kind of latch onto those as you go. And I think over time, I definitely feel like the sentiment has grown in embracing marketing more. Whereas before, it might have just been like the big guys like have a marketing team to do those things. So that starting to see definitely a lot more small, medium-sized firms starting to embrace that mentality. I mean, you look at social media and the prevalence, especially LinkedIn and this industry, I think that it has. And I mean, you can kind of see the way that Indeed and some others have really forced people into the marketplace to focus on digital. I mean, you kind of need to be there to some degree right now to be able to engage with people.
I think you have to be there for sure. And companies still occasionally ask for a brochure. We were on a webinar together a couple of weeks back. That's when I invited you to join me here, because we had so many great things to talk about then. And the subject of brochures came up, and I just think it's so funny where today it still happens where prospects will say, "Can you send me a brochure?" And I tell my team, like, "Get out of here! So the brochure lives on our website, right? Which is so much more thorough and so much more information than you could ever have in a pamphlet of any kind. But yet that mentality still exists, and as long as we give into it, right, it's going to stay. And so part of me, thinks, well, who am I to tell companies not to do what they've always done? Because I think I have an advantage over them, right? But on the other hand, I don't mind talking about it, because I think the rising tide raises all boats, right? And so our industry is so well poised to be thought leaders, and I don't think anyone's in a better position to weigh in on hiring practices, recruiting practices, staffing practices than our industry, my industry, right, that you support. But yet we're generally not thought leaders. We're generally thought of as just salespeople trying to sell bodies, right, which is how industry used to be referred to as, right, body shops. That's not at all the case anymore. So, I mean, do you think, I mean, from the time you guys started in business, so 2008 to now, how much evolution have you seen? Because I have to tell you, I haven't seen that much.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think it kind of goes back to like, how you said it. I mean, you kind of spent like 13 years, going at it with that same mentality. And, it takes, I think, time to realize that you actually have a story to tell. You've got a history there. You've got all that experience. You've got the scars and the stories to tell and the
Yes.
notches in the belt. And I think a lot of people, maybe it's human nature, that people are just like, well, I don't really have anything that's interesting to say, or I'm not good on social media, or, I'm not a good writer, but I think that's also part of the opportunity, being vulnerable out there and being real and authentic. Because, it's like, to your point about like the brochures, like that's like a glossy thing, and it's talking about how, typically, right, stereotypically, how great we are and all the good things that we can do. Which, brochures, and they may have their purpose, and depending on your audience and what you're doing. If you're if you're a firm that goes to recruiting fairs and you're meeting with people in person, maybe there is an opportunity for that. But I think it does boil down to just sharing that story and kind of being, not apologizing for anything, and just putting yourself out there. And I think there's just still that hesitancy sometimes for firms to do that. And I guess that's where also we come into play. I mean, we'd like to try to be the people that help those companies that maybe aren't quite sure how to get started, or aren't sure how to tell that story, or it's all sitting up in their head and it's like, well, I don't know how to articulate this. Well, that's where a firm like us, or others, agencies, can really help to bring that stuff to fruition in a creative way, or tell that story in your voice, even though maybe it may not be easy for that person to do it, or that salesperson, or that recruiter, or whoever that may be. So I think it's just one of those things that's continued growing, just like social media in the early days, and maybe even, I know we'll talk about AI probably here, but like, people are like, I don't want to get into AI yet, but it's kind of that early adopter phase, I think, in that regard. Whereas maybe thought leadership and content and social media and some of these other things, people are realizing they kind of, I think, need to be there. It's just a matter, I think, of, to what extent are they putting themselves out there and putting content out there to help market themselves. I mean, the personal brand is another aspect to this, where every salesperson will probably tell you, a successful one, that you're not just selling the company, you're selling yourself. Because in this world that we live in, and the relationship matters. When something goes wrong, they want to be able to rely on someone that's going to have their back. So working on not just telling the story of the company or the firm that you work for, but telling your own stories in your own unique ways, and how you can help your customers with those needs, and sharing those success stories. Hey, I've been there. I know I've been in the trenches. I can help you with these things, and here are some ways that we've done it in the past, and that might resonate with you.
It's a hard initial step and to take, and I have experienced some of these hard steps in different aspects of life. Starting a business, I thought, wow, I'm going to step off a cliff, and it's such a big drop until you take the step and you realize it was only like a foot down. It's like a movie where the person goes over the ledge and you're like, they're gone forever, and they're only hanging on a ledge 5 feet down, right? And all is well. That's how it was when I started Four Corner, and that's how it was for me when I first started to venture out and share an opinion on anything, so publicly. I said this, I think, I've publicly before, so I'll say it again, is that I used to naively say, well, what am I supposed to say on a staffing company website? Right? It's 5 pages. You have our contact information, you have our about us, you have a homepage with pictures, and like, here's the services we provide. Like, that's kind of it. But in reality, as I was alluding to earlier, as you reinforced, we're in the trenches. That we are at ground zero of how hiring happens, what works, what doesn't. And so we're so well equipped as an industry to share it. But it doesn't happen, right? So we know that. So what can be done about that, I think, is the next logical thing to talk about. So when companies come to you, what is there any kind of consistent theme that you see of problems that businesses, staffing companies, are looking to solve, or hoping marketing will solve for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say, I mean, it's a great question. I think a very thought-provoking one. I think there typically are the obvious ones, right? We need more, for many years, right? Up until I would say 2023, and recently it was like the last 3 years. Hey, we need candidates. We need to access more people. We need to build that candidate pipeline. Number one, is kind of like the high level. Number two, we need clients. We need to fill that pipeline. So I think that's where maybe the challenge sometimes exists is, how do you get from this, very bottom of the funnel need, and we're talking about marketing, which is very top of the funnel, and building awareness and building recognition and engagement, which sometimes does, I think, requires some education in most cases. I mean, definitely some clients come to us and they know exactly what they need, and we kind of just get right into discussing how the relationship can work and the types of things that we can do. But sometimes there is this conversation around, well, let's just talk about what marketing looks like for a staffing and recruiting firm, because ultimately that's the goal, is to put more candidates into positions that you've got, gain more clients, grow the business. So oftentimes I don't think it's like, hey, I need to build my brand awareness, or I need to build, I need to engage more prospects over this channel or that channel. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I want to, a common one actually we'll get is like, hey, I want to be, number one on Google is also a big one that we'll kind of get, which
Snap
is another
fingers. You can make that happen next week. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, and that's a good conversation to have, because then we can talk about specifics about, okay, well, that's a good goal to have, right? But it is a journey that you've got to take in order to do those things. And you're competing, the 20-person, 30-person firm that's competing against the 10,000-person firm. Just by the sheer volume and size of those companies, you're not gonna be able to compete to some degree on Google with that. So it's like you need to develop strategies to come in from other angles and really find out, how you want to engage and differentiate there so that you can be found.
I think it's I want to hear your opinion on this because you're the expert, but I've formed an opinion from my own experiences over the past 5 years as I've entered into this world. And it's almost like the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. So it started with me, as I confessed to you earlier. I shouldn't repeat all this live because it just makes me look so terrible. But that I thought, oh, email marketing, right? Like that's it. I just need to do email marketing and it will solve all my problems, even though my website was 5 ugly pages, right? Disregard that. I just need to send emails consistently and on a cadence and all will be well. So clearly that's not it. I had to establish that presence and commit to a strategy. But as I've progressed, I've learned my strategy was based around SEO to be found on Google, right? Keywords and content, all the things that that will lead to having your site show up on the front page, being ranked. But as time goes on, I've realized how intimate strategies can be for all the different channels that are out there. And I haven't conquered any of them, but I haven't even made inroads to many of them.
Sure.
Like, Reddit, for example, or Quora. I'm convinced you could build an entire business, around marketing correctly on social channels like those, right? LinkedIn is huge in our space. I don't think we've taken very good advantage of LinkedIn. I'm looking to change that in the near future. So I think there's a huge intimidation factor coming in. I certainly was intimidated because I thought there's so much to know and I don't know any of it. But what do you think is the biggest barrier that staffing companies need to overcome to enter into this space and commit to marketing, seriously commit to it?
I think number one is, I think we kind of touched on it. Like it's not a snap your fingers and, okay, I've hired this firm and they're going to help me, from one day to the next. It's definitely, and if you think about the other way around, like, are you going to hire internal staff to help? And when you bring on somebody internally, there's typically a runway to bring them up to speed. And, just like any salesperson to start producing or any recruiter to start producing, it takes time. So I think that's one of maybe the challenges, and I don't know, maybe misconceptions. I don't want to, paint a broad brush stroke on that, but I think that is definitely one of the things, like having that mindset that, it's not going to happen overnight. It is a marathon. It's not a sprint, which is something that we use that terminology a lot with clients. And to your point, like there are so many different things. So it's like, if you are, and we service, small to medium sized businesses for the most part, I would say, 95% of the clients we service are under 100 million in revenue. So the budget is not going to be that of, the major billion-dollar companies that are out there, where they can kind of throw resources at, like, oh, let's just test and see what happens on Quora or Reddit or some of these other channels that maybe aren't the mainstream marketing channels that you can pursue. So I think having a strong understanding on what dollars you want to put in different areas, and certainly an expert, or a resource that you hire or a firm that you work with can help you identify what some of those things are, and putting your eggs in that basket. Don't spread them all out in different areas, because I think that's one. I guess another area was like, oh, we need to do marketing. It's like all they want to we want to do all these different things, versus like, hey, let's just stay focused in this area, whether that's hey, let's just focus on LinkedIn, or let's focus on creating more content so that we've got stuff to share on social platforms like LinkedIn, or to help our search profile or SEO performance. And so that's probably the things that I would point to, I guess, in some of the challenges, kind of like the barriers, maybe, so to speak, is just like not knowing where the focus should be, and like just having a simple strategy. It doesn't need to be a robust. It's like, hey, we want to, get 3 pages to rank in the top 5 on Google. Let's start there. Start simple, and you can build a plan around some simple strategies like that, versus trying to maybe boil the ocean with your first go around, or entering into the marketing world and trying to market your staffing firm.
I'm glad you clarified that, because trust me, I was not suggesting you should go after all these channels. The opposite, right? That because each of them are so need their own strategy. If you take something like YouTube, the big influencers there, it seems easy, right? It seems like they just put up videos. But if you listen to those who've achieved great success there, it's a science. These people are tacticians with it. They study every nuance that goes into, whether it's the content title, the images associated with it, what time they post. I mean, there is so much. And you mentioned, not boiling the ocean, right? I think that's a great way to put it. And you don't need to do that. That's the good news, but you do need to get in the game. And I say that, like, anytime I start talking about this, there's some of my team members will be like, why do you encourage others to do it? Because there's so much room. There's so much opportunity in our industry. And I think our industry as a whole, like, my self-serving reason for doing it is that I think we lack credibility sometimes. And we're seen as an adversary to HR, for example, which we absolutely should not be. We should be their biggest ally, because once again, we have the knowledge. And so I think there's so much room for everyone to do better, and to improve our industry perception. So, and what you said about being patient and needing time, we're in a relationship-based business. Most of us are, anyway. And you don't build relationships in a matter of a day or two. So why would you expect your online presence to thrive that way, right? The best customers any of us typically have are those that were the hardest to get into, because we had to earn it.
No,
and it's question. The same thing, right? If success came easily, the barrier to entry would be really low, and that would be an entirely different situation. So yeah, like, I'm a big believer that anything worth having is probably worth putting in time and effort to achieve. And for me, marketing is certainly that. Now, I do want to ask you about branding. One of the big changes that I've seen over just recently, over the past couple of years, is personal branding becoming so prevalent. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I see, once again, like everything else, some people are doing it really, really well and reaping the rewards. but most aren't. I mean, where do you think the trajectory of that is?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it aligns, I think, with the whole concept around thought leadership, where before maybe it's like, hey, I'm going to post something on social, and if you think about like even getting outside of staffing, recruiting, like just the whole influencer marketing space, right? I mean, there's YouTubers out there that are making millions and millions of dollars just by posting stuff like how to unbox gifts and toys and things like that. And so, I mean, I think there's an audience for almost everything out there, right? If you think about it, instead of, back in the day, maybe it was, hey, I'm in the Chicago market and I've got this set of companies that I'm going to go after. Well, now it's a little bit more of a level playing field. You can kind of go after anybody. And so if you've got something you're passionate about and you've got a story to tell and you're willing to put it out there, you may be resonating with someone that's halfway around the country or on the other side, if you're on the East Coast, on the West Coast. And I think that all plays into it. I think, with personal branding and admittedly, I think it's an area like, I haven't really explored it much, to be completely honest, for our own stuff. But we've helped some companies and some people, some clients with that. And I think it just boils down to, if you're passionate about something and you want to go into it and you want to share it and put yourself out there, then people are going to resonate with it. But if you do it from a position of like, hey, I just want to get the rewards out of, because I've seen these other people doing it and just put stuff out there in a non-authentic way. And I think it's really easy for people to, kind of tune out to that or just kind of see it as more noise. But I do definitely see personal branding as another element, maybe, peeling back the layers of the marketing onion. If you think about it, like the company brand and, the people within it, and then you've got opportunities to go a level deeper and hey, this is my personal brand. This is what I'm going to be about. And this is what I'm going to talk about. And people can get attracted to it or not. And I think the pros outweigh the cons. People are not going to be like, oh, I don't want to work with this person because they have a position on something like this. As long as you kind of stay away from like the really polarizing stuff, which, there's plenty of that out there. But if you just keep it, purely focused on, how you're helping people or, what you're doing. We have a client that is focused on, other like parents that are out there that are in business and not necessarily they're in a staffing business, and it's not necessarily, most of it's not even really about staffing, but it does help her put her brand out there in a way that, a lot of other people maybe aren't talking about that stuff, and it can build some connections and build a following. And it's like, oh, by the way, this is, this is how I help companies, and this is what I do, to as part of my business. And, that does have some benefits in the long run.
I couldn't agree more with that. And even though it seems like staffing is pushed towards commoditization a lot, we see vendor management systems and that sort of thing trying to take the personalization out of it. But my perspective is that we as individual staffing companies are all so unique in the way we do things, and who is a good fit for Four Corner Resources is not going to be a good fit necessarily for the company down the street, and vice versa. And that's okay, right? Because it's a very intimate thing. I mean, I believe in that fully, is that nothing's more personal than recruiting and hiring, right? Because these are people you spend your waking hours with. So when you start working with someone, I mean, I would imagine, part of your job is to have to draw that out, right? Like just kind of walk through high level of, if once someone engages echo gravity, I know my peers out there are like I was 5 years ago, and that is to say, largely clueless, right? Maybe they weren't as clueless as me, but I know a lot of them are even more, right? I know that. So when you're starting off, what just kind of walk through that process from introduction to starting to put your content out there. How's that work?
Yeah, I think it starts with just getting a good pulse check or audit, if you will. Like, okay, where are we at today? is there anything, is there a track record that has been successful? Anything, sometimes we work with clients that they have been dabbling in some stuff, and they've found, they found a thread and they're pulling on it and it's working out well. So we try to take inventory of all of those things that are already working. And so we don't want to, a good example is like with a website, right? Or the content that's been out there and they've already got really good search rankings. So, we don't want to come in and say, hey, let's do something, so propose something that's going to sabotage that or have an unintended consequence is probably a better way to put it for that. So, it's really about capitalizing on what's been going well and then finding the gaps. I think is probably, the first thing that we're looking at. So it's definitely like an audit phase. And then from there, it becomes let's build out a roadmap that's going to focus in on filling those gaps and then capitalizing on the good stuff. Depending on the budget, right? I mean, budget does come into play. So, how many resources can we put at, or what's the level of effort that needs to go into it, and really trying to focus in on those things. And again, trying to be specific. I mean, typically we're not going to get hired to do everything under the sun. So we're going to try to pick our battles, so to speak, and really focus in on those things. And that might just be, hey, let's, get a really strong, you've got this great brand, you've got a great personal brand out there because you've got all this history, you've got these contexts, and you've got stories to tell. So let's have a strategy where we're going to share those and put together a content calendar. Calendar, the roadmap is a big piece to it. And then I think the execution part, like sometimes a lot of what we do is holding everybody accountable to moving stuff forward. It's easy to talk about ideas, I think, and everyone has ideas, but it's like, how do we bring those to fruition? And having those conversations, and we'll propose ideas. Maybe they're not all the great ideas, but let's pick and choose the ones that we want to try to pursue and test it. I like to say marketing is a lot of testing, and especially for somebody that hasn't done a lot of marketing already, you don't know what's probably going to work and what's not. So sometimes it's a matter of let's just test this out. And, maybe it's A/B testing to some regard. But really it's let's see what's going to stick and what's not. And, okay, we learn as we go. Let's throw out the stuff that's not working. Let's keep improving on the stuff where we're starting to see some traction, and then focus in on that, and then refine, I think, is kind of as we move further down that life cycle, it's a lot of refining, looking at some of the metrics of what we're seeing. I mean, in the digital world, you can measure pretty much everything, how much time somebody spends on a page, how much, I mean, you name it, right? And you probably know as good as anybody, and even the staffing metrics, right? All the applicants that come in, how many interviews and submission to fill rates and that sort of thing. So the analytics become a huge tool, and there's so many tools out there right now that can help you with marketing, and they all measure some aspect of it, to the point where maybe you can drown in some of the analytics out there. And also that, I guess, becomes another aspect to this, is focusing on the KPIs or the key metrics that you really want to focus in on, that you feel like are driving that performance.
Yeah, I as you're talking, I'm thinking of some things that I expected to work really well that did not, and some other things that we did that were very much a pleasant surprise. And we would double down on those things and keep our foot on the gas. Can you think of any stories or examples that you could share about something that just was a big win or a surprise, that so a real success story that you didn't necessarily expect to see?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I relate to that tremendously. I think there's been stuff where hey, let's put together, an ebook on, some, let's say, some specific technology that a company's really invested in, and we think we're going to get great results from it. And it just kind of it gets a little bit lukewarm. But then we'll do a post about, maybe it's a poll that we put out there on LinkedIn, and then it's something, maybe as simple as, what do you expect it to, what are the top 5 reasons why people Are rejecting your offers, and like people will latch on to things that you just don't think they will sometimes. And I think those have been some of the surprising things, I think, especially with social, that it kind of just take a mind of its own sometimes. There's definitely been blog posts we've written, in some regards, where I think uh, that just all of a sudden are getting huge hits and tons of traffic. And it's like, wow, we never expected that to get that type of traffic. And, sometimes it's all about the topic sometimes. And again, it goes back to, I think, being found. Typically when you get at I think something that's a little bit more topical or timely, maybe, is something that people latch onto, or you're calling out a specific type of audience. We've done some posts like on millennials versus Gen X, and maybe that's an area, with what you're doing with Zen Gig. Maybe that's something you might have also some further insights, or even more insights than I do. But sometimes people have a strong opinion when you start kind of calling out some demographics of the population in a nice way. We're
Right,
talking about
right,
them, but
right.
they can
It's a
really
it's a dangerous
run.
path at times, right, to go down. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, we're at a very polarized, culture right now, and you have to be conscious of those things, and it's a risk reward, as I think of. We do a live stream with yeah, I'm the Gen Xer, of course, but then we have a Y and Z. It's called Gen X Y Z,
Yeah,
and
right.
some of the opinions and things we talk about how we perceive things in the workplace. It's different, right? It's different. You got to proceed with with caution at times. But to your point, we had a video go viral on TikTok of all places, and
Yeah.
we put so much quality content out there, what I believe to be high quality content. And this was a video of like two little kids, and one like push the other one over. I mean, it was like a America's Funniest Home Videos type of thing. And that's what went viral, right? And it had some text about like me at work on a Monday or something, just absurd that you'd expect to see on TikTok. But I'm like, okay, the hours of work and the dollars and the content we produce of such high quality, and that's the thing that goes viral. Okay, but I'll take it, right? And so that's what works on TikTok,
Yeah.
which would not work at all on LinkedIn, for example. So um, everything you said, of course, resonates really well with me. And that testing is, one of the things that I like as a numbers person is you can quantify it all, right? There's no ambiguity, and sales has a lot of ambiguity around it, right? Why did I not get that deal? Well, it's subjective, right? Why can
Mhm.
this person not get more, bring in more business? It's very subjective. Marketing is not, which I love. I mean, you can see what you get out of it, the analytics, as you were saying. So I think it's just so many people in my position who are your prospects just don't realize the power of it and how effective it could be. So I'm certainly a big proponent of companies using marketing services more. What would you say is Echo Gravity's really advantage in the market? I mean, there's a lot of competition out there, just like in staffing. There's
Yeah.
a lot of organizations that do what you guys do. I can give you my perspective from when I met Kevin, your partner, years ago, years before I met you. It stood out as very professional, told me what I needed to hear, even if it wasn't what I wanted to hear, as someone who wanted quick results. Kevin was one of the people, as I shared with you before we started recording, who said, this is a mountain you have to climb. It doesn't happen
Mhm.
overnight. It's going to take a matter of months before you start expecting results. Great advice, but also, as someone who's a sales minded person, that's not what I wanted to hear. I was like, I want to give you $1 today and have you generate two for me tomorrow, right? That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
Kevin's like, that's not going to happen. And I respect and appreciate that in a way that I could not have back then, right? I did, and I appreciate it then because I've kind of sold that way too. Let me give you the bad news, right? So you can't
Sure.
hold it against me later. But other than that, being upstanding and forthright and all that, what's Echo Gravity's real advantage in the market?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely, you're right. I mean, there's an agency out there probably for every aspect of marketing. You can go find design agencies, SEO, content. I mean, kind of people that focus just on the function. And then there are firms out there that just focus, on staffing and recruiting. And I think that that's grown over the years. And, I'd look at that as probably a sign that there's a demand for it and there's a need for it. And so I think, kind of to use your analogy, before all ships rise, I think when there's more players in the market. But what we've tried to do is really focus one of our key pillars is on the thought leadership and content piece. So we've invested pretty heavily in helping our clients tell stories, be creative in the way they tell those stories. I think that's, as we go forward in this world, and we've touched a little bit on some of the technology and the tools. I mean, even 2, 3, 4 years ago, it's much harder to design graphics. Now you've got tools like Canva that has, someone that didn't go to school to learn the Adobe tools or haven't put the time in to learn those tools. Now you can go on, on a Canva like type of tool and create a really nice presentation with maybe not all of the skills that the kind of traditional graphic designers have. I still think there's a need for graphic designers because you can't do everything now, but there's much more of a level playing field. So I think creativity in how you tell those stories is something as we go forward that is going to continue to be a need. And so we've tried to invest pretty heavily in being able to help companies with that, whether it's in the written form or that's helping to write a script to do a video. We're not video production company, but we like to try to be in a position where we're helping companies from a thought leadership perspective. But at the same time, we also can provide, a full service on the marketing side. So we've positioned ourselves as a kind of an outsourced firm. So whether you've got, internal staff or you don't, we can plug the holes there to provide marketing strategies and execute on that marketing. And I think that's been probably one of our, when you think about some of the differentiators we bring to the table, I would probably point to those. Obviously we've got some experience in staffing, recruiting, so do others. So, I mean, that is a differentiator to an extent, but maybe not the full story. So I typically go back to, how we can help companies tell those stories, create great thought leadership, great content. And then with those, in my opinion, what we've seen, I mean, it's hard to push stuff out on social or, get SEO traffic or get leads without having great content or great thought leadership.
Couldn't agree more. I think such a great answer. I didn't know how you were going to answer that, and I'm glad you said
Neither
it.
did I.
That's right. But it really resonates because it's not about the pretty pictures on your website that somebody, so friend Kate, you'll appreciate this, asked me to look at his website the other day, and he's like, okay, I'm getting ready to pick someone to hire, and they said, what I need is I need better graphics on on my homepage. I need the videos. I'm like, 2 people a month see your homepage, right? Like you could have, it doesn't matter. You could have a secret code to a vault with $1 million in it, and no one would ever see it on your homepage. Yeah. So without the content, it's not going to matter. And it does all start there, in my opinion, because it's, you want to be found, but what are they going to think once they find you? Right? Are you going to put yourself out there as an authority and, someone with expertise, as you just said, or is it going to be, hey, you have a pretty picture? That's not going to lead you to a whole lot of confidence in choosing that as a company as a staffing partner. So I think that's such a great approach, and it's the right one for sure. That I think you guys are separated from a lot of your competition who just does not view it that way. And I have a lot of respect for the way you guys do business.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, look, we always want to make everyone look cool, but if we can make them look cool and get that stuff to resonate, I think that's kind of where the ideal spot that you want to be, and knowing your audience, right? I mean, I think you can create great content, but if it's missing that mark to the audience, then that's maybe a missed opportunity. So really having a good understanding, like knowing we call them buyer personas or your target personas, and understanding what makes them tick, and everyone's a little bit different. And it may seem simple on the surface, but sometimes it's kind of hard to really get at that and peel back the layers. Like, what type of content do they consume? What do they do on their free time? And you can start to group people into these personas and really understand who they are, because at the end of the day, they're all people, they're all humans, they all do the same things that everybody else does. They just happen to be in a specific industry or in a specific buying position, or they're a certain type of candidate and that sort of thing. So having a really crystal clear view of that, and understand, like, maybe you need a survey, and maybe you need to talk to your clients. And I think that's another thing that maybe not everybody does, even though it seems maybe a bit obvious. You may think the answers to what they may say, but sometimes just doing a simple exercise, like, hey, find your top 5 clients, and like, hey, mind if I just pick your brain for 10-15 minutes to ask them, like, why do you choose us over the other 5 companies that you maybe can work with? And you might be surprised at some of the answers that you get, and that can be good ingredients to go and create more stuff and find more people like that.
Yeah, it sounds simple when you say it, and but it's to apply that effort and to put structure around it is so complex for a staffing company, or most businesses anyway, small businesses, medium businesses, big businesses, to stop what you're doing and to put that kind of effort in place, right? Or even something like a content calendar, which you mentioned earlier. It's so necessary, right? But how many companies can do that on their own? So I think most of us really need a third party to come in and oversee that effort, and to know what order things should be in, what steps need to be taken. It's not intuitive. It's not, I mean, it may even be intuitive to some degree. It may be easy to comprehend, but to do it, you almost need someone from the outside to hold you accountable, I think, to ask those questions, to put those steps in place. I think a third party is very much needed.
I love the analogy of, I don't know, I always played sports growing up, and I just love analogies to running a business like a sports team. Like, every team has a coach for a reason, and if you look at the NFL these days, they've got a coach for every position. Right. So, there's a reason, even, the best of the best, they've got someone there to help guide them. So, whether that's someone you have internally, or whether that's, an external, third party resource, they can help you to serve a purpose and hold you accountable. Like you just said, I mean, sometimes we're our own worst enemies. Like, I need to go to the gym today, but I go there and I don't know what to do. So I go to a gym where they tell me what to do.
That's right. Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier.
Knowing what to do and actually doing it, very, very different things. I don't know if you're watching Hard Knocks right now.
I haven't. Yeah.
That I didn't know the story of Aaron Rodgers and his coach, who he bonded with in Green Bay, who's now with the Jets, who had a temporary head coaching stint elsewhere. Right.
That's right.
Just hearing Aaron Rodgers talking about, Aaron Rodgers is the best in the game right now, and there's just to watch him. I'm just fascinated by getting to see him up close, how great he is. But he still has a coach, right? He still needs a coach and relies on a coach. So that's such a that really is meaningful to me right now, because I just watched episode 3 last night.
Yeah, it's next time. I've watched the first 2. I can get into that stuff all day. But I think there's great analogies between the sports teams, and I think also the competitiveness, and that might be a topic for another podcast.
Well, I'll get you back on. I promised. I told you 30 minutes. We're at 48. So last question. Predictions for the future. Shoot. You mentioned AI, so now I'm gonna we'll bring it up. How could we not? What do you see? What crystal ball? What's going to be different 5 years from now? Biggest change that AI is going to bring about.
Oh man, I wish I knew this one better, right? I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I probably would be maybe in a different spot than I am today. But if I were to predict the future, I definitely think, as we've kind of talked, casually, I think AI will certainly play a role, no question. The biggest change to if you think about technology and marketing specifically, that has happened since, in my opinion, since Google. So I don't see, I see it as a tool. I don't see it, maybe it'll replace some, functions, but I don't think you're going to see marketing people go away. I don't think you're going to see recruiters or salespeople going away, or the need for a staffing firm go away. It's just it's gonna be another tool, and the people that embrace it and find the ways to make it a synergy for what they do, I think we'll reap the rewards of it. It's I think it reduces a lot of time spent in a lot of areas. Whether, even if you're a writer, I don't, we're not using AI to go write blog posts for clients or anything like that, but we're writing stuff and we're taking the work that we're doing and we're using that tool to make it better, or to do more work, to be more productive. And I think maybe that's, if you read some of the news out there, and just you hear some of the top leaders in some of these companies, they're talking about productivity a lot and being more productive with what you've got. And I think that's probably, to sum it up, I think people, productivity is poised to be, be able to do more with less, using some of these technology like AI. There's automation that's out there now, which is huge. And that's kind of, before AI came, I think automation was a huge, or it still is a huge topic of conversation out there. So I see that stuff only growing and becoming more intertwined. But I still think there's still going to be the need to still engage with people and tell those stories. And now, in the history of time, that's, you kind of go back to, all the books and things that have been written out there. They're out there for a reason, reporting on stuff or telling those different stories. And I don't see that going away, and maybe we'll see like AI movies in the future. I don't know, but
I don't think you will know. That's a
maybe, yeah,
right?
Exactly. That'll be will we know? Will we not know? I don't know, but
nobody has that crystal ball, right? That's an unfair question. So thanks for answering it anyway. I wish we did, but we know that it's here to stay. And I think of it the same way, right? It's going to allow us to be better, at what we do, faster, more thorough, do new things, more with less. That hasn't changed. I mean, since, you're younger than me, but since I got out of school, that was it. Do more with less. And of course, that's going to continue. That's human evolution. And
yeah.
It's going to be a fun ride. That's for sure. So I'll get you back on. We'll talk about personas maybe next time. We'll talk about technology, because there's so many different areas we could go down. But thank you for providing such a good overview today and introducing Echo Gravity to my listeners. I think anyone who's considering hiring a marketing firm, and if you haven't ventured into that world, you're behind the curve, but it's not too late to catch up. That's for sure. There's so much opportunity that I hope you give Brian a call. So we'll put all your contact info in our show notes, Brian. And thanks for all your time today. It's been great.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it. Love what you're doing out there. And yeah, I think you're kind of a testament to a lot of stuff I was saying, just getting out there and bringing this stuff to the forefront. So love what you guys are doing, and wish you guys all the success in the world.
Thanks so much. Yeah, no one was starting from scratch more than me. That we've proven, I think, pretty well. So, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's awesome you're sharing that stuff out there. So, all
right, everyone. Well, thank you for listening, Brian. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.